In this week's Parsha, we read about a number of things, including sources for some of the most fundamental laws in Judaism, such as kashrut, ritual purity. Vayikra, Leviticus as a whole, is evidently very halakha forward. For anyone who doesn't know me or know my background, I went to university to study theater, specifically playwriting, and I continue to work in the industry today. And as such, storytelling has always served a particularly holy purpose for me. Stories were my bridge into increased religiosity. And to put it in more specifically Jewish terms, I found myself more strongly motivated by and connected to Agadah rather than halakha. Halakha, while vitally important to my Judaism, was the practical methodology, while the Agadah, the storytelling, was at the core of my religious motivation. It was the how to the why. So it should come as no surprise then that I always found a stronger connection to the first two books of Torah compared to the latter three. While there are certainly memorable moments in the Jewish story within Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Devarim, they tend to be more focused on things such as laws, censuses, repetitions of previous stories. If you think of some of the more memorable moments of storytelling in the Torah, we've got the flood, the binding of Isaac, Jacob's ladder, slavery in Egypt, Moses' ascension to leader of our people in the eventual Exodus, parting of the Red Sea. These are all Bereshit and Shemot. However, despite Vayikra focusing heavily on halakha, we can find some vitally important Agadic moments as well. In fact, in our Parsha this week, I believe there's a story that is not only extremely relevant to our present reality as Jews in 2024, 5784, but one that actually contextualizes the importance of Jewish law, even to the unobservant, to the secular, in a narrative fashion. This, of course, is the story of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu. And to briefly kind of re-summarize the story, whilst receiving instructions on the roles and requirements of the Kohanim in the context of sacrificial offerings, Nadav and Avihu offer what is referred to as a strange or unholy fire, an Eish Zarah, against explicit instructions from Hashem, and are subsequently consumed by it. The reasons given for why they offered this unholy fire are sparse, and the general agreement, though, seems to be that it was for some sort of personal gain or self-aggrandizement. Now, there have also been many interpretations from great rabbinical sages for many years on the specifics of this story and why the two brothers were killed for something seemingly so mundane. It certainly follows in the tradition of other stories which seem, at the very least, kind of morally gray from our modern frame of reference. These explanations for their demise, a few examples that I saw were purported drunkenness, having too casual of a demeanor in front of the divine, or even the idea that bringing this foreign fire constituted an attempted coup d'etat against the status quo. However, the somewhat straightforward explanation that's resonated with me most on my reading of the Parsha this year has simply been that Nadav and Avihu, out of their own self-assuredness, failed to seek out or listen to the sages of their time, Moses and their own father, Aaron, before attempting to act outside of the confines of halakha for their own benefit. So simply put, Nadav and Avihu acted without fully respecting Jewish tradition for their own personal gain, and they were then consumed by a fire of their own creation. So, as I said, this is not only a powerful story, especially for me personally, I resonate with Aaron's stoicism in the face of tragedy, but it's also a somewhat extreme reminder of the importance of doing Jewish things within the framework of Jewish tradition and law. This is not to say that there's only one way of being Jewish or that one must strictly follow halakha, but rather highlighting the importance of seeing ourselves as a nation within this framework and understanding the risk of disregarding tradition or history for personal gain. And I'll contextualize this a little bit with something that happened this week, and this is why I wanted to speak about this particular story. So earlier this week, my wife and I had an unfortunate encounter in one of our Jewish spaces with an extremely anti-Israel Jew. And to be clear when I say this, I'm not speaking of a Jew with legitimate criticisms of the Israeli government. I'm speaking of a Jew who not only advocated for the destruction of the Jewish state, but also compared Israel to the Nazi regime. And when confronted by my wife and myself, not only did this individual refuse to recant their allegations, they doubled down. It was shameful and it was embarrassing. And this conversation did not resolve productively. And this individual was subsequently removed from this Jewish space. Now, this isn't something new or something that I haven't seen before. In fact, this is the same type of as a Jew rhetoric that was on full display at the Oscars a few weeks ago with Jonathan Glazer's speech, and I believe Rabbi Sachs spoke about that. But being the one to specifically personally witness this individual's delusion, desperate to be seen as one of the good Jews, this time I couldn't help but feeling kind of bad when he was removed from our Jewish space. Like, it made me sad. And I'm sure that since this removal, their rhetoric has only gotten far worse. And the reason I felt sadness is because we know historically how things play out for Jews who try to capitalize on being a good Jew. Whether during the Spanish Inquisition or during the Shoah or any other points of Jewish persecution, what happens to these Jews? Same thing as all the other Jews. Anti-Semites don't see good Jews as allies, they see them as useful. And this is what brought me back to the story of Nadav and Avihu. Just as these brothers acted outside of the framework of Jewish tradition for their own gain and were consumed by the fire, so too will Jews like this individual I spoke with earlier this week get burnt. And again, it's not about level of observance, but a willingness to proudly see yourself as a member of Am Yisrael. There was a tablet article this past week that was being circulated around called "American Jews Should Become a Little More Israeli," which was essentially arguing for Max Nordau's concept of muscular Judaism, and that is a willingness to be on the offensive rather than the defensive with our Jewish identities. And I think it applies here as well. We should remain steadfast in our several millennia-old identity. We should be proud of our vast religious civilization and our hundreds, if not thousands, of great sages. We should not capitulate to anti-Semites to save face for them. I believe this is the only way to avoid being consumed by an Eish Sarah of our own making as well. And on a final note, for those that don't know me, I've been the head of programs and communications here at Beth Torah for the past 2 years, and I will be leaving my position to pursue some other things, including B'ezrat Hashem, Rabbinical School in the future. And I just want to thank everyone for welcoming me into this beautiful congregation. I've had some very special memories here, including my own wedding back in January. And I really do hope for the best for the future of Beth Torah. And I'll be sure to visit as often as I can. So thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Toda Rabbah. Thank you.